My name is Bella. Until last Thanksgiving, I believed hardship was simply my fate. Student loans loomed like prison walls. My sneakers were held together with duct tape, and instant noodles from the campus cafeteria were practically my signature meal. I told myself I wasn't bitter, sacrifice was part of growing up. My parents were doing their best, and I just had to endure. Then the night I sat at my billionaire grandfather, Daniel's dining table, beneath chandeliers that glittered like frozen fire. Everything I thought I understood about my family shattered. The room smelled of roast turkey and cinnamon. Cousins laughed, crystal glasses chimed. For a brief second I felt safe. I felt like I belonged. Then Grandpa raised his glass, looked right at me, and said the words that tore my world open. "Bella, glad to see you're putting the college fund we set up to good use." Struggle had become so normal that I stopped noticing how much it bruised my spirit. My mornings always began the same. I stumbled out of my cramped apartment, clutching cheap coffee I could barely afford, laced into those duct-taped sneakers that squeaked with every step. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus cafe, pouring lattes for kids who didn't understand what minimum wage meant. At night I collapsed onto my mattress on the floor, textbooks stacked like bricks around me, wondering if exhaustion could make someone forget how to dream. Still, I told myself I was lucky. Lucky for a roof over my head, lucky to be in college at all, lucky that my parents, John and Linda, were somewhere out there, even if they rarely answered my texts. When they did, it was often a single word, weeks late, busy. That was the closest thing I had to support. So when Thanksgiving arrived, I tried to push the bitterness away. I told myself it didn't matter that I had nothing to bring to dinner except my presence. Grandpa Daniel's mansion had always felt larger than life. Gates glinting under golden lights, a driveway long enough for 20 cars, windows reflecting the stars. It was intimidating but strangely comforting, a reminder that wealth and stability existed somewhere in my bloodline. Inside, the house glowed. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across a dining table, fit for royalty. The air smelled of roasted turkey, buttery mashed potatoes, and cinnamon rolls. My grandmother, Margaret, moved between kitchen and dining room, fussing over platters that already looked perfect. I slipped into my seat and tried to make myself small, unnoticed. To my right was little Mason, my 8-year-old cousin, sculpting mashed potatoes with his fork. To my left sat Aunt Julie, with raised eyebrows and sharp questions that made every holiday feel like an interrogation. Across the table, my parents chatted with Uncle Richard, laughing a little too loudly as if proving they belonged in this glittering place. The whole scene felt theatrical. Everyone playing their roles, Grandpa Daniel at the head of the table commanding respect, Grandma smiling sweetly while pretending not to notice cousins sneaking extra cornbread. My parents acting like everything was normal despite ignoring half my calls that semester. I looked at the chandeliers, the fine china, the velvet drapes. For a moment I wanted to believe this was family. Whole, unbreakable, but a knot tightened in my stomach. In families like ours, silence often spoke louder than words. Sometimes a single sentence could shatter the illusion. Halfway through dinner, the room sank into that lull where everyone is busy eating and conversation dies down. Silverware clicked on porcelain. Glasses chimed softly. For a fleeting second, I let myself breathe. Maybe this Thanksgiving would be awkward, but survivable. That's when Grandpa Daniel cleared his throat. He never made speeches unless the moment mattered, and everyone fell silent the second he rose. He lifted his crystal glass slowly. To family he began, his deep voice warm and a little shaky with age. To seeing our children and grandchildren grow into people we can be proud of. The family murmured agreement, raising glasses and nodding. I felt my lips curve into a small smile. For a second I believed in unity, pride, and belonging. Then his eyes landed on me, his smile softening. "And Bella," he added, "glad to see you're putting the college fund we set up to good use." Time stopped. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My heart kicked once, then raced. I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. College fund, across the table. Dad choked on his wine, coughing into his napkin, his face going a violent red. Mom went ghostly pale, fingers trembling as she pushed peas around her plate. Aunt Julie's eyebrows shot higher, her eyes darting between my parents like a hawk circling prey. Then Mason, sweet oblivious Mason, looked up wide-eyed and whispered, "Wait, you didn't know?" The words hit harder than a scream. I turned to my parents. My voice came out thin, shaky. "What? Fund?" No one answered. The room felt suffocating. Grandma shifted uncomfortably, lips parting like she wanted to speak then closing. Uncle Richard leaned back, eyes narrowing as if watching a drama he'd rather avoid. Cousins stared at their plates, suddenly fascinated by mashed potatoes. Finally, Grandpa frowned. Confusion clouded his face. "The college fund we set up when you were born. Haven't you been using it for tuition? We've been putting money in it for years, every birthday, every Christmas. Even when things got tight, we made sure there was something." I stared, pulse in my ears. My throat went dry and words stumbled out. "No one ever told me. I didn't know it existed." Grandma gasped softly. Aunt Julie leaned forward. "Wait, who's been managing it?" That was the moment everything began to unravel. Dad cleared his throat, eyes fixed on his plate. We didn't think she needed to know." I almost laughed, but it came out cracked. "Didn't need to know." Mom jumped in, voice tight, defensive. "We used it for the house. For bills, emergencies. We thought it was best." Grandpa's pride drained from his face, replaced by something cold and sharp. His voice sliced through the table. "What do you mean you used it?" The air turned electric, the heavy silence humming in my bones. Truth clawed up into the open. In that instant I knew nothing about my life would be the same. My chair scraped the polished floor as I pushed back, heart hammering. "You didn't think I needed to know?" My voice cracked on needed, higher than expected. Dad still wouldn't meet my eyes. His gaze stayed on the silverware as if he could disappear into its reflection. "We thought it wasn't necessary. You were fine. You've always managed." I laughed bitterly. "Fine? Do you know what fine looks like for me? Working 20 hours a week on top of full-time classes, eating instant noodles because I can't afford grocery, duct taping my sneakers because I don't have money for new ones. That's your definition of fine." Mom's face flushed. Her hands trembled as she set her fork down. "Bella, don't make this worse than it is. We had no choice. The recession hit us hard. The roof was leaking. The car needed repairs. Your brother needed braces. We used the money for the family." "The family?" My voice cut like glass. "What about me? Wasn't I part of the family? Or did my future not count?" Mom snapped, voice raised for the first time. "You were a child. You wouldn't have understood how bad things were back then." "I was a child when you decided to steal my future," I shot back. "But I'm not a child now. I understand perfectly." "You lie." A heavy silence followed. Everyone stared. Cousins shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Julie leaned in with predatory curiosity. Uncle Richard pressed his lips into a thin line. Even Mason had stopped playing, his fork hovering as if afraid to move. Grandpa's voice cut in, low and commanding. "That money was never meant for you two," he said, glaring at my parents. "It was Bella's. We made that clear when we created the fund." Dad's jaw tightened. Anger flickered. "Maybe if you hadn't insisted on putting it in our names, this wouldn't have happened," he shot back, words hanging poisonous in the air. My grandfather's face hardened, knuckles white on his glass. "We put it in your names because we trusted you. We believed you would do right by your daughter. Clearly we were wrong." Mom looked like she might cry, but I had no pity left. My throat ached, but I forced the question. "How much was in it?" Grandpa hesitated, eyes full of regret. "About $40,000 by the time you turned 18. Probably more." We kept adding to it. The number landed like a fist. $40,000. Enough to wipe away every student loan. Enough to buy food, books, maybe even give me a chance to breathe. Instead, I'd been scraping pennies and breaking myself to stay afloat. I turned to my parents, hands trembling with rage. "You let me drown in debt while you sat on my lifeline. You could have told me, you could have said something," Dad muttered. We did what we had to do, voice low and almost inaudible. No, I said, trembling but fierce. You did what was convenient for you, not for me. Mom reached for my hand across the table, tears in her eyes. I jerked away as if her touch burned. Don't call it protection. Call it what it is. Betrayal. The table was dead silent. Even the chandelier seemed to buzz with the weight of the moment. My legs shook, but I forced myself to stay standing. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet daughter taking scraps. I demanded answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I had them. I sat only because my knees could no longer hold me. My breath came in shallow bursts, like I'd run a marathon with no finish line. Across the table, my parents avoided my gaze. Mom picked at her peas. Dad drained his wine, jaw locked as if I embarrassed them. $40,000 kept echoing in my head. 40,000 that could have erased loans. Sleepless nights worrying about rent. Those hollow ramen meals. 40,000 that might have returned years of my life, and they had spent it quietly while I carried the weight alone. Grandma finally spoke, voice soft. We need to talk about this. All of us. But I wasn't listening. My mind ran through years of exhaustion. Double shifts at the cafe, hands blistered from the steam wand, walking to class in shoes patched with duct tape, rain seeping through, birthdays where my gift was a card and a reminder to be grateful. All the while, a lifeline meant for me was being siphoned away on my parents' excuses. I swallowed and forced the lump in my throat down. You let me believe we were broke, I whispered. You let me think I had to do it all alone. You watched me struggle and said nothing. Mom's tears spilled. Bella, please don't. I snapped. You don't get to cry. Not after this. Grandpa's face was unreadable, his silence louder than anger. For a man who built empires, betrayal by his children seemed to wound deeper than any failed deal. Aunt Julie murmured, well, I suppose the truth always comes out. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to make them feel the storm inside me. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened a document I had kept quietly for months. Every dollar I'd earned, every scholarship I'd scraped together, every freelance gig that barely paid for groceries. Proof that I had fought for every inch. Dad glanced at the glowing screen, and for the first time, real fear crossed his face. He knew what evidence meant. Paper trails, consequences. The room spun. I couldn't breathe in that house any longer. I shoved my chair back, grabbed my coat with trembling hands. Bella, where are you going? Grandma called weakly. I didn't answer. My throat was tight and my vision blurred. I walked past chandeliers and velvet drapes, and smiling portraits that now felt like cruel jokes. In that moment, I realized something worse than missing money. It wasn't only about dollars stolen. It was about trust. Trust, once broken, was worth less than nothing. The drive back to campus was silent except for my old car's hum. My eyes burned from held-back tears, but my hands gripped the wheel steady. I didn't blast music, call anyone, or cry. I let the silence fill me until it hardened into something sharper than grief: determination. By the time I parked outside my tiny apartment, I already knew what I had to do. The next morning I sat at my desk with burnt coffee and dialed the number Grandpa had mentioned, the bank. My voice shook at first. Then I steadied it. My name is Bella Anderson. I believe I'm the beneficiary of a college trust fund that's been mismanaged. The advisor sounded confused. If you're the beneficiary, how is it possible you didn't know? I bit a bitter laugh because my parents had never told me. Hours of transfers, verification codes, and holds followed. Finally, the answer I feared. The fund had been drained. Not all at once, but slowly and methodically over 7 years. Every withdrawal signed by my parents. Every cent gone. The advisor hesitated and said carefully, you may want to consult a lawyer. If the trust was designated for your education, this could fall under misappropriation. Misappropriation. The word rattled in my head. Heavy, foreign. My parents, potentially criminals in the eyes of the law. That afternoon, I walked across campus to the legal aid office. The representative was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who listened without interruption. As I spread out my documents, the original trust paperwork, Grandpa had emailed me, the bank's confirmation statements, and my own meticulous records. Every scholarship, every paycheck, even notes from nights I chose groceries over textbooks. When she finished, she folded her hands and sat back. Bella, based on what you've shown me, your parents may have committed a felony. This isn't just unethical. It's potentially illegal. My chest tightened at the word felony. The people who tucked me in as a child, who taught me to ride a bike and kissed my scraped knees, might end up in court. That night I pulled out the folder I'd been quietly building for years. It began as a survival log, scholarship letters, pay stubs, freelance invoices, proof that I'd clawed forward without a safety net. Now it was more than a record. It was evident. I remembered a winter night at 2 a.m. when I'd calculated whether to buy shoes or groceries. I'd chosen groceries and taped the shoes again. Meanwhile, my parents were spending the fund on leaky roofs, car repairs, and braces. Everything except me. As I flipped through the pages, I saw more than numbers. I saw the life I should have had, and the life they'd taken. I zipped the folder into my bag. My hands shook, but not with fear, with resolve. They thought silence would bury the truth. I wasn't that quiet girl anymore. I had proof, and I planned to use it. 2 nights later, there was a sharp knock at my door. My stomach sank before I opened it. Dad stood there, collar up, eyes hollow like sleep had abandoned him. For a moment he looked smaller, older. Then the old weight returned when he spoke. "Bella," he said softly, "can I come in?" I blocked the doorway with my arm. "Why? To lie to my face again?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "No. I need to explain, please." Against my better judgment, I let him in. He stepped into my cramped apartment, glancing around like he'd never seen the peeling paint, sagging couch, or the textbooks stacked like barricades. "I didn't realize," he muttered and trailed off. "Didn't realize what?" I asked. "That your daughter was living on canned soup while you drained her college fund." His shoulders slumped. "We never meant for it to go this far. We thought we'd pay it back. At first it was small amounts for repairs and bills. Then we fell behind. It got away from us." My laugh was sharp and humorless. "You chose this? Every withdrawal has your signature. Don't pretend it just happened." He winced, but went on. "We didn't just use it for ourselves, Bella. We used it for your brother, his school, his surgery. He always needed more help than you. You've always managed. You've always been strong." The implication hit harder than I expected. Because I was the resilient one, I deserved less. Because I survived silently, they decided I didn't need my own money. He couldn't answer that. Shame flickered on his face. But it wasn't enough. "You should leave," I told him. "No more excuses. You had 18 years to tell me the truth, and you stayed silent every time." He lingered, lips parted as if searching for words, then left. His footsteps down the hallway sounded hollow. The door had barely closed when my phone buzzed. It was Grandpa Daniel. "Meet me tomorrow. Just us." The next day, I found him at a quiet diner near campus. He sat with a steaming cup of black coffee, his expression heavy. For once there was no smile, no pretense. "I'm sorry," he said, immediately. "You didn't do anything," I replied. "No," he corrected, shaking his head. "But I trusted people who didn't deserve it. That's on me." He continued. "I checked the trust myself. It's gone. Every cent. I've already spoken with the bank. They're cooperating. If you want to pursue charges, you have every right." Hearing it from him felt final. Then he slid an envelope across the table. "I can't undo what they did. But this is yours." I stared, afraid to touch it. "It's not everything," he admitted. "But it's a start. I've changed my will. Everything I leave will go into a trust only for you. No one else touches it." Something softer than anger welled up. Gratitude. That night I opened the envelope. A cashier's check for $20,000. It should have felt like salvation. Instead I felt anger that my grandfather believed in me in ways my parents never had. Christmas at his mansion had always been a spectacle. Tall velvet-draped windows. A tree nearly touching the chandelier, lights like stars. To outsiders, it looked perfect. To me, it felt like walking into enemy territory. I brought only one thing that night: a thick folder of documents, bank statements, legal letters, my records, organized proof I hadn't imagined years of sacrifice. The smell of cinnamon and turkey hit me when I walked in, but it didn't comfort. It felt suffocating. My mother laughed too loudly in the kitchen with Aunt Julie. My father lounged on the couch with whiskey, pretending calm. Their laughter stopped when they saw me. Grandpa gave me a small nod from across the room, a reminder I wasn't alone. Dinner started with stiff politeness and safe topics: traffic, weather, sports. No one mentioned the trust. Every time I glanced at my parents, they averted their eyes. My brother scrolled his phone, oblivious. Then Dad stood to give his Christmas toast, raising a glass with rehearsed warmth. "We're so proud of how far our kids have come." The words felt like a blade. I stood, the room freezing. "Always stuck together?" I echoed, voice sharp. "Except when it came to honesty. Except when it came to me." I slammed my folder on the table so the silverware rattled and said evenly, "This is the full breakdown of the trust fund you drained. Every withdrawal, every date, every cent, cross-referenced with my student loan statements. Just in case anyone here still thinks I'm overreacting." Gasps rippled. Grandma covered her mouth. Aunt Julie leaned forward, eyes glittering. "Bella, please, not tonight," Mom pleaded. My laugh was bitter. How many nights did I walk home in the rain because I couldn't afford bus fare? How many nights did I go hungry so I could make tuition payments? While you sat on the money Grandpa and Grandma put aside for me, you let me suffer. And now you worry about timing? Dad slammed his glass down. "We did what we had to do. It was for the family." "For the family?" I shot back. "Then why was I treated like a stranger? Why did my brother get braces, new laptops, and tutoring while I duct-taped my sneakers and begged professors for extensions?" My brother looked up, shifting. "It wasn't all for me," he muttered. "I didn't know it came from your fund." His words stung but didn't surprise me. "Exactly," I said coldly. "You didn't know because no one told you the truth, just like they never told me." Grandma's voice trembled. "We didn't know, Bella. We're so sorry." I nodded once. I believed them. But this wasn't only about money. It was about respect, trust, and choices. I told my parents they could have told me at any time, even after the fund was gone. Instead, they let me believe we were struggling together when they'd left me to struggle alone. Mom whispered through tears. "We thought we were doing what was best." "For who?" I demanded. "For me or for the version of me that never asks questions?" The silence after that was unbearable. I took a deep breath, hands trembling but steady enough to flip open the folder. I filed a formal complaint with the bank. Legal proceedings are already in motion. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because actions have consequences. And I'm done carrying this burden alone. Dad jumped to his feet, eyes blazing. "You're suing your own parents?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm holding you accountable." He shouted that I'd tear the family apart over money. My voice dropped to a razor edge. "No, you did that the moment you decided I didn't matter." I closed the folder, took an envelope I'd prepared earlier, and placed it on the mantel. "That has copies of the legal documentation and a letter explaining everything. So there's no excuse for ignorance. Consider it my Christmas gift." Mom sobbed. Dad stared at the wall. Cousins looked down in shame. No one moved. Grandpa rose, walked over, and hugged me. "You don't have to do this alone," he whispered. "You have more family than you think." I hugged him back, chest tight and eyes stinging, then pulled away, grabbed my coat and walked into the snow-covered night. No one followed. Snow crunched beneath my boots like brittle glass. My breath fogged in the cold, but inside I burned with grief and fury. I didn't look back at the lights or the portraits. Let them sit with their silence. I had carried enough. A week later, the bank sent an official letter. An investigation had begun. If fraud or misappropriation was proven and the signs pointed to my parents, they would have to repay the full amount or face penalties. I didn't celebrate. It felt like a reckoning that should never have been necessary. What I did do was take Grandpa's cashier's check and walk into the bank with my head high. For the first time in years, I paid down a portion of my student loans. Watching the balance drop felt surreal, like finally breathing after being underwater. The rest of the money went into a new account under my name only. No shared signatures, no loopholes. Spring arrived. I graduated with honors in my borrowed cap and gown, scanning the crowd until I found Grandpa Daniel clapping with pride. My parents weren't there. I told myself I didn't care, but part of me ached. A month later, I started a job at the startup where I'd interned. The salary was more than I'd ever dreamed. I moved into a modest, clean apartment, bought new furniture, and for the first time in years bought a pair of brand new shoes, no duct tape required. The real change was internal. I had long equated strength with silence. Endure, accept, never ask for more. My parents had relied on that, assuming I could handle less because I always had. But strength isn't silence. Strength is refusing to be taken advantage of. Sometimes I replay Grandpa's Thanksgiving words. Glad to see you're putting the college fund to good use. That line tore my life open, but it also gave me clarity. It wasn't only the money that hurt, it was the loss of belief, the betrayal by those who should have protected me. That scar won't fully fade, but scars don't make you weaker. They remind you what you survived. I survived. Now when I look in the mirror, I don't just see the exhausted girl who taped her sneakers. I see a woman who demanded the truth, who reclaimed her future. Not because of a trust fund, but because she stood up for herself.